my name is Michelle Isherwood. I'm from Humphrey chapter and the San Francisco Alumni chapter, soon to be the New Hampshire Alumni chapter too. So, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to our webinar on alcohol beverage control law. We have two great panelists tonight, Jay Ross and Grace Yang. I'm going to give them a minute to kind of give you a little bit about their background and their practice area, and then we'll get started. We'll start with prepared questions, and then we'll move into questions from you, the participants. If you just want to put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom, that would be great. So let's get started. Grace, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice area?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Grace Yang. I am a shareholder at the Gray Robinson Law Firm, and I am based in Tampa, Florida, which is the skyline that you see behind me. I joined Phi Alpha Delta when I was a 1L, and then I eventually rose and became the justice of the Wilson chapter at Cornell Law School, where I got my degree. Thanks to everybody who's joined. I started practicing law in Tampa, Florida in 1997. So I've been doing beverage alcohol work since 1997, so 24 years. It's a fascinating area of law. I find it very interesting. It's very interdisciplinary. The client work is very interesting. I focus on the retail level of the industry. So I represent businesses that buy, sell, distribute alcohol, and they will sell it to the end user, the consumer. So I represent hotels, restaurants, country clubs, theme parks, golf clubs here in the United States. And I also represent retailers that sell for off-premises consumption, convenience stores, grocery stores, supermarkets. So that's my primary area of focus on the transactional side and on the land use side of the practice.
Great, thank you for joining us today. Mm-hmm. Jay Ross, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and your practice?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Ross. Essentially, I have my own firm. The law office is Jason Michael Ross, but I am also of counsel to two other law firms, Stone Mandia in Neptune, New Jersey, and Scott and Silver, Linwood, New Jersey. And I've been kind of in the practice of alcoholic beverage law, or practicing as an attorney for about 20 years. I joined Phi Alpha Delta when I was in law school. I had gone back to law school. I didn't go right from college to law school. I did some other stuff in between, and got a master's in public administration. And then I joined the Paterson chapter when I was in law school. Unlike Grace, I wasn't that active in law school. Hardly did anything. They did ask me to be an officer my last year. I was a marshal of that chapter. But then when I graduated, the New Jersey Alumni chapter grabbed me and asked me to be involved, and just kind of increased my involvement from there, serving as an officer in the New Jersey Alumni chapter, which I am once again. And I was asked to be a district justice in New Jersey, Eastern PA, Delaware. For those of you who are familiar with the system, it was District 22, Phi Alpha Delta, and then I went on the Phi Alpha Delta's International Executive Board, which essentially is the board of directors for about 10 years. My last two were as international justice. Now I'm the chair of the International Advisory Board, which essentially is the immediate past international justice advisory capacity. And like I said, I've been practicing about 20 years. I started out, first time and I think this is one of your questions, and I probably would answer it. I did a clerkship with the New Jersey Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control, and kind of ended up back there a few years later after doing a clerkship with the administrative law judges, doing a couple of years in the AG's office, representing the New Jersey Department of Education, some of the the state universities and colleges. So then I was a deputy attorney general for about 8 years after that, and went into private practice now. What am I with getting close to 10 years ago. So, like Grace, I do mostly retail representation. So you're talking your restaurants, your bars, your liquor stores. I do represent at times some of the wholesalers or one of the manufacturers, but that's not as frequent as the retail. I'd say 95% of what I do is on the retail, the retail. You have the 3-tier. We could get into the 3-tier system later. So thanks.
Great, thank you. So I want to start out, Jay, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how did you get into this field? And then what suggestions do you have for others that would be looking to enter this practice area?
Okay, so when I was in law school, I was working full time and then going to law school at night 4 years. And I was a paralegal law clerk with a couple law firms. So in my 3rd year, I decided to go into career services and look at some of the job opportunities there. And I applied for a summer internship with the New Jersey Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control, because the law firm I was at said, hey, you want to take a leave of absence for the summer, go do something government, that's cool. If you come back, cool. You don't, it's all good. So I got that summer job with the New Jersey Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control. I initially didn't want to be in alcoholic beverage control. I found it to be a little boring. And I guess at that time I was about 28, 29 years old. So the action was in litigation and there wasn't too much of that. And it didn't get me in the courtroom. So I guess I went a couple of years to try that out. And maybe 4 years later, I was with the Division of Law and I ran into the director at the time of the ABC, Jerry Fisher. He gave me a ride. He saw me walking to the post office, gave me a ride back, and we talked. And eventually, that ended up in me coming back to the New Jersey Division of Alcohol Beverage Control. That's how and then I practiced in that area and with the state, and then now in private practice.
What about you, Grace?
So I was at Cornell Law School in Ithaca, New York, which has a really strong school of hospitality program, and a hotel school there, and took some classes that I thought were really interesting and intersected between law and the hospitality industry. And so it my interest grew from there. I also learned as I got older that prohibition and history, studying history and studying United States history in high school, and then continuing on with law school, I thought it was interesting, some of the policies that came out and how alcohol laws were grounded in history and policymaking, and how the United States was pretty unique in having 2 amendments to the Constitution devoted to alcohol. The 18th Amendment, which passed prohibition, and then the 21st Amendment, which repealed prohibition. So I just thought that was rather interesting as I was studying history and learning more about that. Love to travel, enjoy staying at hotels. Who doesn't love to eat and drink and appreciate the products from the industry? And I thought it would be an interesting way and an interesting career path, especially here in Florida, where the hospitality industry and tourism is so strong and is such an important part of our economy here in the state and really in the United States. Think about all the jobs that are generated by the hospitality industry. How many of us, as part of a first part-time job, summer job, internship experience, might have worked in the hospitality industry. So it kind of touches on a lot of people and a lot of lives. And so I just became more and more interested in it. being at Cornell and seeing the hospitality program there kind of made my interest grow. And then when I was applying for jobs here in Florida, I interviewed with different law firms, and I had an offer, a job offer coming out of law school to join a beverage, alcohol, and food practice at my previous firm, Holland and Knight. And I just thought it was going to be a great, interesting career path to start.
Great. Do you have any suggestions for someone who thinks that that's kind of where they want to end up? What suggestions would you have, either for young lawyers or law students looking to get into this field?
I think it's to try to explore those interests, to try to take classes where you're studying history, United States history, learning about the temperance movement, learning about why the United States had prohibition, why the Noble experiment failed, why the United States decided to repeal prohibition, and then the laws and policies that are grounded and spring from that. We have federal laws, we have state laws, and we have local laws about alcohol. We also have an international component with wine, spirits, beer being imported into the country. Learn about customs laws, take a class on customs and international trade, take some classes on administrative law, contracts, land use, I think estate planning, tax. These are all classes, corporations law. These are all very interesting areas, and our practice really touches on a lot of them. Jay, do you have any to add besides the
Sure.
subjects?
Well, I mean, as Grace said, as she indicated, it alcoholic beverage law, it encompasses a lot of other areas of law, like a lot of the big ones I deal with regularly: contracts, administrative law. You gotta know administrative law in your jurisdiction.
So I think it's learning about the industry, studying it. It's very interesting, I think, how there's such an interplay.
Yes.
That's great. And then what are some of the typical issues you deal with in your practice?
Well, what I see are there are issues with applying for licenses. Okay, so Jay and I are both representing retailers. So we are representing retailers who need to apply, get qualified with different agencies to get the licenses that they need to operate. Every state is different. And then depending on your location, you may also be licensed by a local municipality. States like Georgia and Illinois require that you obtain not only a local alcohol license to sell at retail, but also a state license. States like New Jersey, where Jay is, you're dealing with municipalities, municipal clerks, as well as the state agencies that are in play. So there is a lot of focus on administrative law, understanding the process, the rules and the statutes that apply to our clients, counseling them through what they can do and what they cannot do. I do a lot on compliance. Clients will ask me, can I do this? Can I do that? There's a lot of compliance issues with operating a business. We have projects where we're also getting involved in land use, zoning, property entitlement issues. So if a business acquires a piece of land and they want to develop a new hotel, they want to develop a new restaurant, a new bar, a nightclub, oftentimes you need to apply and get approval and input from the neighborhood associations, property owners, in addition to planning and zoning committees. So there's a component of land use work that I see, licensing, counseling, compliance work. And then occasionally our clients get into trouble and they might have violations. And Jay, maybe you want to talk about some of the violations issues that you come across.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of enforcement issues here on top of the license transfer issues. In New Jersey, especially with the license transfers, most of our retail licenses, although there are some state issued licenses, the majority or significantly, most of the licenses are municipality issued licenses. So you're dealing with municipalities doing different things. Are they supposed to do different things? Not necessarily, but you have to decide whether it's something you're going to, take a stand. Is it going to be your mountain to die on, or are you going to let it go and just deal with the weird quirks that a municipal clerk or a police department's putting you through? Usually, most cases, you're just going to deal with it because it's not worth the effort. Your client doesn't want to spend money. You don't want to spend the time fighting a municipality on that, and you're just trying to essentially get them their license or get something through. But going back to enforcement issues, that is done concurrently by municipalities and the state. We have some municipalities who won't do it at all and just defer to the state. They just call, if something's going on, they see it, they'll call the state ABC in. Where others are more, say, proactive, like where they will try to do everything themselves and they don't even like the state ABC coming into their town, and they'll do their own ABC stuff, and that gets interesting because there's a lack of consistency there with some of those municipalities. But I mean, some of these violations, so to speak, they could range from something as simple as, oh, you didn't have your license certificate posted properly. You had a bottle of vodka blocking it so customers can clearly see it. You had it on a shelf, and that's a violation. Or it might be something like complex undisclosed interests involved in a license. Something we've been dealing with a lot lately is the New Jersey ABC has decided to start charging licensees for COVID violations. So they've crafted special custom charges for that didn't exist before, and they're charging those. And that could be debatable as to whether they can actually do that or have the jurisdiction to do that. But in most instances, your clients do not want to spend the time and money taking it to the mat. They most of these cases, like 99 point whatever % of these cases will settle because most people want like a commercially reasonable resolution. No, they don't think that they're guilty of the charges. They rather plead essentially non-volt or no contest and pay a fine in lieu of suspension. So that ends up being the result. Many of those cases, and we as attorneys in the private sector, we are dealing with, just trying to get them the best deal possible. I know because I was a prosecutor for the ABC, so I prosecuted those cases. So in some instances, I now represent some of the people who I prosecuted, say, 10 years ago.
So there are negotiation skills that will sometimes come into play.
A lot of that.
You touched on some of the legal trends with COVID, COVID's effect on the industry. And I don't know if either of you could elaborate on that. And then also, are you seeing any crossover with cannabis laws in your practice? I know in some states it's very separate. In other states, you can have both. I don't know if there's any states right now that you can have both in one establishment. Is that something that you're seeing in your practice areas, and also any other trends that you're starting to see in the industry, both with COVID and other things that are going on?
Well, with the COVID stuff, you had that negative aspect for licensees, but then the positive is they have now been temporarily allowed to do things they couldn't do before, like cocktails to go. Before, if you were a plenary retail consumption licensee, it had to be on premise Someone couldn't take a drink and leave, but now if you have it sealed properly or whatever, you can do that. So actually had a meeting earlier today where they were discussing, because now that they've gotten to do that, a lot of these licensees, once like the COVID period or whatever the state of emergency period is deemed over, once that's deemed over, supposedly that's supposed to go away. So a lot of these licensees would like to keep those things that they got, during this, and or may be fighting to keep that permanent, more permanent.
I will admit I'm a fan of the cocktail to go.
Right.
Well,
They're-
and the ability for restaurants, bars, those on-premise operators, it really depends on your location. So you have some states and some areas where if you had a certain kind of a license as a restaurant or a bar, you could pre-COVID sell alcohol for on-premise consumption as well as to go. Certainly during COVID, when a lot of the on-premise businesses were forced to shut down for public health reasons, we definitely saw that proliferation of alcohol to go and more flexibility, because the business model had to change to allow some of these businesses to survive. What Jay was saying is, there are some states where they said, oh, well, this was nice to have during COVID. Can we keep it? Because some of that ability to sell alcohol to go was under emergency orders, under COVID orders that got extended 14 days, 14 days, 14 days, 30 days. Some states have now codified those changes into law. Other states have not. So there's a tension now between industry members and other parts of legislative branches or the executive branches who might want to revert back to what they had pre-pandemic. So again, interesting, right? You have politics, and you have industry members trying to lobby for certain things that they would like to see done. And whether they get their way in the states is still a work in progress. We still are seeing changes now as a result of the pandemic and as a result of COVID. We saw a lot of licensing agencies trying to help the industry by extending license renewal deadlines or trying to reduce the renewal fees for the licenses to try to give business owners a break economically because of COVID and their ability not to be able to use the licenses as freely as they might have been before. We're seeing ongoing economic challenges. The well-capitalized businesses are able to ride this through. But unfortunately, we have seen a lot of businesses shut down permanently or really suffer through this time. And so you're seeing some shrinking in the industry, in the number of businesses that are operating. We're seeing other businesses who are financially strong enough, come in to try to capitalize on some of those market trends. I see consolidation in the industry. There's consolidation on the retail level. I'm seeing consolidation on the wholesale distributor level. Beer distributors are consolidating. We're seeing some activity there as well.
As far as
Okay.
a lot of the consumption licensees, the restaurants and the taverns, they really were getting hit hard with this COVID. But on the other side of the coin, the people with the distribution licenses, the businesses with the liquor store, so to speak, had never done better than they did in 2020.
Yeah. It's been interesting to see how technology and social media has really become a bigger factor in the alcohol and food industry too. We have, the advent of Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok, ways for businesses to try to engage with customers, drive traffic to their businesses. You're seeing much more online activity, which has been industry, online activity where you can order food and alcohol delivered to your doorstep. So it's been interesting to see how technology continues to develop and how the alcohol industry is also embracing and trying to explore some of those changes with technology and social media, branding, using influencers to try to promote different brands in the market.
Unfortunately, the government entities, at least in New Jersey, with respect to their statutory scheme, they have essentially an antiquated statutory scheme from 1933, and which did not anticipate e-commerce or social media, and they are some ways trying to figure out how to deal with it. In some ways, they are at a loss. So it's been interesting.
Also, I understand they didn't anticipate or unlimited mimosas either.
And Michelle, you were remarking about cannabis,
Yeah.
cannabis, and that also is, I think, going to really vary state by state. You have agencies like in Washington State, where it's formally known as the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board now. And you have cannabis heavily regulated. But that's really going to vary by state. In some states, it's still outlawed. And it's really going to be treated differently depending on location. But common threads include, a pretty significant application process, background checks, the need to do backgrounds and investigations. There's a lot of interest in, who owns the business, who has a financial interest in the business, whether it's alcohol or cannabis. We want to know who has control, who has a financial interest, and are the people involved, we use the term of good moral character. Are they people who we want to be in the industry? Because, again, back during Prohibition and the heyday of bootleggers and speakeasies and whatnot, you had a lot of organized crime activities, and you had people like Al Capone making money hand over fist from alcohol. So there's a lot of there's some common aspects between cannabis and alcohol, but it will change state by state.
I mean, New Jersey and like some of the states happens to be one where it's separate. They recently legalized the cannabis. They're still trying to get themselves together on it, but any and all plans they put forth do not have it. They have it as a separate agency having nothing to do with alcoholic beverage, but background investigations will largely be similar. The two big things they look for in background investigation are, are you somehow criminally disqualified, and what's your source of funds? Who are the funds coming from? Who's putting in the money? Who you're borrowing money from if you're taking a loan? And they're big on trying to find undisclosed interests. Okay. And as a footnote here, the unlimited mimosas is not a legal thing in New Jersey.
And we won't be doing our next trip there, at least for brunch. So here's a really important question. It's been weighing me. Why can't I buy a bottle of vodka here in Tahoe and ship it to Sister Greta in Memphis on my own through the Postal Service? And then to go beyond that is, I'm moving to a different state, and I know that some of the wineries that I'm members of can't ship to that state. Can you talk a little bit about that, and why can't I ship my bottle of vodka to Sister Greta, and also then why can't certain wineries or distilleries ship to certain states?
So you've got federal law to thank for that. U.S. Postal Service is federal agency, and it's in 18 USC, something in there, where it is a violation of Florida law to ship most intoxicating liquors of 0.5% or more alcohol. So so it's codified in law. The Internal Revenue Service and the taxing authorities want to collect tax. There's a distribution system. Jay mentioned, the 3-tier system. We have different tiers of the industry, with those 3 tiers being the manufacturer or the supplier, producing the alcohol beverage, beer, wine, spirits, and then sending it to the 2nd tier, your wholesale distributors. And then the wholesale distributors will service and sell to the licensed retailers, the 3rd tier. And that 3rd tier, the licensed retailers sell to the consumers. And these tiers, this 3-tier system historically was kind of kept separate. Now the lines have really blurred through the years, right? We have these 3 tiers, but now we sometimes have a blending of tiers. So if you have a craft distillery where you are producing a limited volume of vodka, you might also be able to act as a retailer and sell that vodka that you made. If you are a craft brewer, you might have, if you're a craft brewer, you're a brew pub, you might be able to brew and manufacture a certain volume of beer and also be able to turn around and act as a retailer, selling that beer either for off-premise consumption or selling it, on a tap in your tasting room. So those 3 tiers have kind of blurred a little bit, but the U.S. Postal Service, you're not supposed to ship that bottle of wine directly to your friend or your relative in another state. But the industry is evolving, and there are a lot more states now that will allow they're called direct to consumer sales, DTCs, direct to consumer sales. So you travel to California, you visit the wineries in Napa and Sonoma, you taste the wines that you really like. Depending on where you live, you might be able to get cases or bottles of wine shipped to your doorstep. Direct to consumer sales are more common in the wine industry than they are in the beer and distilled spirits side of the industry. And that's a lot of times because of how the laws have evolved and how the wine industry has lobbied for certain accommodations.
Yeah, Grace, pretty much I concur with her on a lot of that, and a lot of what she's talking about with the specifics of some of the blurred lines are also true in New Jersey. New Jersey largely sticks to the 3-tier system. An individual who has an interest in one of the tiers can't have an interest in the other one. However, the wholesale level and the manufacturing, winery level, whatever you want to call it, top 2 levels can be combined in New Jersey, so that's okay. But there, with a few exceptions, or even a couple exceptions, the retail level and from the other levels, that there's essentially a wall there. You cannot have any, if you're a retailer, you cannot have any interest in a wholesaler. Actually, I can't think of any exception to that. You really can't. It's, it's something called tied house, and there can be no tied house. But you do have something which almost like the hybrid, like where we have the restricted brewery license, like a brew pub, which is a manufacturer that only produces a certain amount, and you're kind of selling retail. That's an incident. That's one incident where you sort of can, but you can't have an interest in something else. That's some of that gets funny. It gets rather complex. You're trying to deal with people because somebody's like, hey, I want to have this group, but I want to have this interest in something else, but I don't get it. They're doing this, and what I was told when I started working for the state ABC, was if you're looking for common sense, go be a contract holder or something like that. Liquor license law, a lot of it's not common sense. So, throw that out the window right away.
So
Yeah, one thing that I has been very interesting is that we think of ourselves in the United States having free market and capital markets and things like that. But certainly in the distribution side, you have beer distributors with exclusive territories, and wine distributors that have exclusive claim to specific brands. So if you want a particular, name your brand of beer, wine, spirits, there's only one distributor in a specific geographic area that might carry that. And only that distributor is going to be able to source that beer or wine or spirits for you. And so there are these exclusive, franchises, exclusive territories that get negotiated and contracted out from this industry, which is kind of counterintuitive sometimes to what we normally think of as an open market.
So the wholesale industry, they have a very strong lobbying lobbyists. So when you go back to talking about the shipment, I go to a winery with you in Paso Robles, and I find this great winery and I want them to ship to me in New Jersey. For the most part, it's not going to happen. Anything, I believe it's up until 2012, you couldn't do it at all in New Jersey. Then in 2012, they established this limited thing where if the winery produces less than a certain amount of wine, I believe it's 160,000 gallons or cases. It's 160,000 cases. If they produce more than that, they're excluded and they can't do it. They can't direct ship. They have to go through a New Jersey wholesaler. And a lot of New Jersey wholesalers are not interested in those wineries. So it's sort of like, consumer can't get the wine they had out in California. But yeah, if you're a smaller winery, you can get like this out-of-state wine license and be able to ship as, you're paying the appropriate taxes and everything. So yeah, for the last 9 years or so, we've been dealing with that limited exception, but still people in New Jersey can't get like 95% of the wines that are out there shipped directly to their house or business. Like if I want something sent to me, I probably have to have it sent to my place in Florida, not New Jersey or a friend in New York or Delaware, because we are one of the most restricted states with that here in New Jersey. And a lot of it has to do with the powerful interests of the wholesale industry, because, if you're shipping to somebody, directly from a manufacturer or winery, then you're skipping the wholesaler. They're not getting.
They're not getting their
cut. The product's not going through that. Yeah.
So I do have a couple questions from participants, and if anybody else has questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section for Jay and Grace, and we'll get to those. So the first one is, I think you kind of touched on this about the certain classes you should take in law school. And then the person asked too, is there any value to getting like an MBA or majoring in hospitality management?
I think it can be helpful to get an MBA or get a degree in hospitality management. I think any additional skills and knowledge makes you more well-rounded and can potentially make you a better legal counselor to your clients. And so I don't think it would hurt to have that knowledge. I think you can bring a lot of useful knowledge, understanding businesses, understanding how businesses are managed and operated, can certainly be useful. You can learn on the job too. You can learn and gain that experience as you are progressing through your legal career. But some of the lawyers who I know in the beverage alcohol space do have master's degrees, they have MBAs, they might have concentrated in hospitality management in undergrad, or they have some practical work experience from working in the field. I know somebody who used to, grew up in the bar business. His family owned a bar and grew up in the business, knew about all the different things that they had to watch out for, served a stint as a bouncer, had stood at the door, checked the IDs, was trying to check for the fake IDs, had to sometimes throw people out, had to stop people at the door saying, sorry, you can't take that drink away from the establishment because you have to keep the drink within a licensed premises. And just kind of got interested in the business because he grew up around it. So having an MBA can help, having a hospitality management degree can help. I think there are a lot of different ways to get into this field.
And
Jay?
then the other question I have is, do either of you have any experience handling tribal alcohol licensing? And if so, what are your thoughts on that? Or is there, is it different than what we face in the state level, or?
Yes. So here in Florida, we have the Seminole tribe, and they operate the Hard Rock Casino on, and so we've had some interactions with the Seminole tribe. I've also worked on some other casino projects in other parts of the country on tribal land. And so you need to educate yourself and learn about what the policies and the requirements are for that tribal land, whether it's for alcohol licensing approval, for tobacco licensing approval. What does that particular tribe and what do their particular requirements need you to, what is the process? So we've done applications in Oklahoma and Florida are the ones that come to mind right now. I think I did one in New Mexico a while back, but yes, different process.
What about you, Jay?
I haven't had that experience, but I know it's, as Grace had said, you got to follow that jurisdictional, the jurisdiction of the tribe and the agency that they have there. We have something similar in New Jersey where we do have the casinos in Atlantic City, and that's a whole different agency. It's a similar concept, but it's a whole different agency than it's not the New Jersey Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control that regulates those licenses. So and there are similar rules, but they're different. It's a whole different set of things in a different agency you're dealing with. So the concept would be similar. And then as to the first question, the one that Nicole had asked, that one, it's like any type of that experience or education would only be helpful to you getting into this practice, or you having knowledge in the practice. Some of the better liquor license attorneys I know had a background where they worked for the hospitality, or maybe they owned a bar or a liquor store. I know in New Jersey we have two administrative law judges who have a background where they were tavern owners, and they went through whatever they went through. That now they're administrative law judges, so they have a unique understanding of the alcoholic beverage laws when the ABC and other parties appear before them. They don't have to figure it out as much. They understand how those businesses operate. They have a more realistic view of how things operate.
I I have another question regarding federal administrative agencies. Is there any indication that the current federalism scheme is subject to change in the future, given SCOTUS's makeup and marijuana?
Well, I mean, and on the federal side, you have the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax and Trade Bureau, TTB, as we call it. TTB has people who are career officials, career employees, but each administration might set policy might have different focuses on policy. Supreme Court certainly has a say in different issues that touch on the alcohol industry. Most recently, there was a case involving, he was in Tennessee. There were Tennessee wholesalers had filed suit because there was an issue about the residency requirements. Tennessee had required a certain residency requirement, and SCOTUS weighed in on that, which was interesting. There's always a potential for Supreme Court to move things in a different direction. I know that this upcoming term, they're going to be looking at a lot of consequential cases. I can't think of any off the top of my head that might directly impact alcohol right now. That's on the docket. What about you, Jay?
Federal decisions are few and far between on this. Just by looking at the 21st Amendment, it's a very state-specific thing. The states largely have control over the transportation, sale, alcoholic beverages in their jurisdiction. So there has to be something else at play there to have an alcoholic beverage matter be in the federal system. So it is kind of where I recall seeing stuff with the Tennessee case. I'm not really. There's nothing else I can think of that's out there right now.
And then I have another question. I'm a senior in undergrad, and I've already found a lot of interest in this area of law. Do you have any suggestions on what would be the best way to get more involved in this area during my gap year?
I think during a gap year, you can try to find opportunities to work either with an agency that licenses and regulates alcohol. There might be, part-time or full-time job opportunities, to work with agencies, to work with, to be a law clerk, or to work in a law firm in a private practice setting. There are certainly companies where you can explore job opportunities. A lot of retailers, whether it is an on-premise retailer or an off-premise retailer, a lot of chain operators might have more job openings than the independently owned, but it's worth looking and exploring for those opportunities. I'm seeing a lot of technology-based companies operating in this space now. Amazon, DoorDash, Uber, Drizzly, Thirsty. There are more and more companies that are operating in this space and growing in this space. If you happen to be lucky enough to be in an area where there is a supplier company, explore opportunities there. Bacardi is based in Coral Gables near Miami. Pernod Ricard, Heineken have major offices here in the States. You can find, if you're you've got Anheuser-Busch InBev. There are opportunities to work in businesses to try to learn more about this area.
Do you have suggestions, Jay, too?
I agree with all of Grace's suggestions. I know in New Jersey, at least with the state ABC, they had opportunities for internships. I know there were a couple of ABC investigators or are ABC investigators who started out. They did an internship there either during or right after college, where they were assigned to the licensing bureau of that agency, and they could learn some of the basics of liquor license, or like I did in law school. I did the internship there for law students. But yeah, you can find firms that practice in that area, see if they're taking any interns, or maybe there's something you could do for the firm, maybe pick up some experience in the area, or just generally something maybe in the restaurant or bar industry at the retail level. I mean, other than that, Grace pretty much was pretty thorough with her recommendations.
I'll just give a plug for Phi Alpha Delta. I would use your Phi Alpha Delta network that you've been building by being a member, and reach out to some of our members that are in this field, and see if they'll meet with you and really talk to you about it. You can go on the directory or reach out to the executive office. I think on the directory you can sort by people who are in this field and get an idea, maybe reach out and contact them. Just a plug for Phi Alpha Delta and its networking opportunities.
Absolutely.
And we have time for one last question. So it says in Minnesota, we have an issue where once breweries reach a certain production level, they can no longer sell beer to go. There are similar restrictions on distilleries, and it is causing some to move facilities out of the state. Have you done any lobbying on issues like these?
I have not. I am not a lobbyist, but Gray Robinson has a separate government relations and lobbying group. So I have not. Remember, there is a tension. There's a tension in all of this with different members of the industry trying to lobby to promote their interests. And so while you're describing a certain business model, there are others in the industry who do not like that business model, who want it capped and limited in the kind of activities they can do, because they benefit from being in that space. So why do we have craft distilleries with a certain limited amount of product, craft brewers with a certain amount of product? The big brewers, the big suppliers, they are dealing in volumes where they are contracting with very large wholesale distributors with gigantic warehouses to move that product, who have the vehicles, have the trucking fleet, have the employees to be able to move that product through the country. And there are tax ramifications, tax and revenue ramifications in how the business works.
Like Grace, I am not a lobbyist. I had actually gotten off a conference with the lobbyist for the New Jersey Licensed Beverage Association right shortly before I came on this. New Jersey has I believe maybe, I'm not sure what Minnesota's setup is, but New Jersey has something similar. When we talked about the three-tier system before, the type of brewery that you mentioned, in New Jersey, that is one of the exceptions to the three-tier system. Normally, a brewery is a manufacturer. It belongs in, essentially, you have the A tier, and then the wholesalers B, and then C licenses are the retail. So essentially what you have is, it's a manufacturer that's been allowed to operate in some ways as a retailer. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is you're you're able to still manufacture, but you're limited in the amount, and then you're allowed to sell directly to the customers, which most manufacturers are not. So in New Jersey, specifically, that's what's been allowed to go through. They're definitely the lobbyists for those breweries that wanted more, because in New Jersey, those type of breweries, and it's a limited, and it's the restricted brewery. They can't sell food. They can't do like a restaurant. It's limited to maybe like certain snacks or whatever to the people who can kind of come and consume on the premises there. And you have the lobbyists trying to get more benefits and loosen that up. But then you have the lobbyists for like the New Jersey Licensed Beverage Association, who I was dealing with. They are the restaurants. They are the people who have these retail licenses, and they don't necessarily want the competition from the manufacturer. They feel that the brewery should be selling through the wholesaler to them as retailers, and not operating their own restaurant right next door, which actually is an issue we had in my very municipality, where this brewery opened up. They were, let's just say, going a little stretching beyond what they were supposed to do, and then the restaurants a few doors down were having a fit, and you have strong lobbyists on both sides of that argument. It's not everybody is on the same page in the industry, so you have you have interests on both sides, which will go to the legislature and to the enforcement, to seek more enforcement on the one side or less on the other, so to speak. So
Great. I want to thank Jay Ross and Grace Yang for coming on tonight and sharing their expertise with us here. It's been great to have you. Thank you both so much for coming on. Thank you everyone for coming and joining us for our webinar series. We've got another one coming up in November. We're going to take a break in December. We've got a great one on wellness and fitness and health and all the good stuff for January. So start out your year. Just keep watching the Phi Alpha Delta website and your email, and we'll let you know when the next professional speaker series is. But again, thank you, Grace and Jay, for coming on tonight. We really appreciate it.
Welcome.
thank you for putting this together, Michelle.
Have a good night, everybody.